Buddy. Give this a go here. Here we go.
Yes, it is, ladies and gentlemen. Father Hines and his great band playing for you from the new Grand Terrace on Chicago's great South Side.
Evening, everybody.
Ready now for 30 minutes of Super Jive in the Father Hines style. Yeah.
Evening, Timothy. Let's get ready for 30 minutes of Super Jive in the Father Hines style. 10 minutes for us. Hey, Laura and Ann.
Ah, it's a Limehouse Blues.
Evening, Rodney. Hey, Kathy. Hey, Janice. Hey, Octavia. Hey, Mom. Hey, Ann. Hey, Denise. Christina. Hey, Kim, Allison, Amy, Kathleen, Rose, Carol, Betsy. Hey, Amy. Becky, is anybody I missed there? I think it's kind of popping in and out of order here. Hey, Luann, hey, Darlene, Lori over on YouTube, and Karen. Hey, Diane, hey, Napur, Gladys. Yes, there will be information over on the Mysterious Chicago Regulars Facebook page. The Mystericon 2022 is a go. Wow. Hey, Heather, Melissa, hey, Amy, hey, Joanne, Melissa. Hey, Heather, Katie, and Bob. Hey, Judy. Hey, Megan, Casey, Shaq. Hey, Cindy. Hey, Gina. Gina, I was hoping you'd be here tonight. Now that I think about it, I didn't add all of the pictures yet. I've got them, though. They're here. Hey, Shaq, Nancy. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Judy. Good to have you here, Judy. Hello, Karen. I should probably email the boat already. Right? Christina, I am drinking some Buffalo Trace tonight.
That's what you call a powerhouse soda.
Hey, Jordana.
Earl Father Hines carries on.
Oh, Amy, glad you like it.
Roy Harris to sing.
Oh, hey, there's a new pub date for the Graceland book, and it'll be out August 8th. But that seems to be a firm date now. Hey, Debbie. Well, Megan, jeez. I don't know quite what to say to that. Yeah, it's just a matter of getting the boat booked. That can be weirdly tricky. Hey, Cindy. Hey, Nancy. Hey, Dave. Hey, Laura. Hey, Cherie. Hey, Marcia. Hey, Bridget. Happy Friday, Laura and Susan. Bob, yeah, if you go to University of Illinois Press's webpage, or a lot of the bookstore sites have stuff for pre-ordering. Mystericon might be in favorable weather. I can't predict that far out. That's months away. Hey, Kathy. Hey, Ann. Kathleen, yeah, there's a publication date for it now. August 8th it's coming out. Gina, I got some more footage over the course of the last week to add another stop to this one. Betsy, I'll do some new t-shirt designs pretty soon. Right now, I kind of need to find a couple of days when I'm not creating something. Hey, Jim. Hey, June. I'm making the list of all the stuff that I've covered, all the news stories that I've researched over the last 2 years. And it's tough because I don't have browser history for the first year. But I'm over 300. And I keep thinking, oh wait, what was that one story? What was that thing in that one neighborhood? What do we go there for? What about that one house, etc.? I mean, we've done somewhere in the range of probably 750 morning mini tours now. Bridget, you can do it. You can finish the blanket on time. Hey, Debbie. I'm trying to think of a family-friendly version of the "and so" joke from the Rocky Horror, but you can't do it. And so. It's like right before the criminologist says, and so, you shout, Betsy Ross used to sit at home and blank, 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 and then he gets to, and so. At which point you shout, she had time to sew? Hey, Dina, hey, Marie, hey, Paula. I need a good Rocky Horror night soon. Any waffles in Mystericon? I imagine so. Hey, Aviva. Hey, Paula. Hey, Dorothy. You can keep it up on your phone or something, just turn the sound down. Keep the chat up.
As long as we're driving out west here, well, let's stop and have a little Father Hines melody of the Colorado sunset.
All right, this is Earl Father Hines playing at the Grand Terrace Ballroom on Chicago's Great South Side, a place that we'll be visiting virtually later today. Evening, Amy. Hey, Barbara. Hey, Aaron. Howdy, Mitch. And Donna. Yeah, waffles. We could probably arrange some regular waffles, too. Plenty of good places to get waffles around here. For a town without waffle houses. Hey, Savannah, welcome back. Hey, Betty. Hey, Maureen. Hey, Phoenix and Merrill. Hi, Carmen. Welcome along. Maureen, I'll do my best. Hey, Adam, we do have a huddle house, but it's not the same as the huddle house. Over in Avondale. Oh, hey, Diane. Hey, Steve, you know I'm not a doctor, but I'll take it.
With a bow to Leroy Harris for the words, we turn on now to the next two.
Hey, Grandma Bell.
Father Hines gives us a bit of jive under the general heading of...
Hey, Liz over on YouTube. Hey, Leah. Hi, Gail. Pullman, did you get yourself a new icon? Well, it's easy enough to make TIE Fighter-shaped waffles. Hey, Heidi. Alright, we'll give it another minute. We'll let Earl Father Hines play a little bit more. So many people come on right at 8 o'clock. Oh, it's George Pullman's birthday. I see. Hey, Lori. Hi, Susan, Tony, Mary, Ellen, Laura. Ellen Wars. Put the Max Rebo right up here. Can't quite position. I got the whole band up here. Oh, hey, Ann, that sounds cool. Thanks, Carla. That video, that TikTok I did the other day of the columbarium, the Fisher columbarium at Graceland is all of a sudden getting me a lot of comments. Whoa, okay. A minute ago it was at 1,000 views. Now it's at 1,700 views. Did Max Rebo survive the bomb? Max Rebo has survived bombs before. Hey, Geraldine. Thanks, Laura. I've just gotten onto the TikTok. I've decided I don't have enough. I'm not creating enough content. I don't know about viral, but it went from 1,000 to 1,700 awfully fast. Now 1,800. Well.
Concert by Earl Father Hines and his orchestra, so now it can be told it's reaching you from the new Grand Terrace on Chicago's south side, where the couples are gaily dancing here in the cool atmosphere to this jive of Earl Father Hines.
Or the jive of Earl Father Hines, coming to you live from the Grand Terrace Ballroom on Chicago's great south side. I love the announcer on that recording. But all right, everybody, I think it's about time that we get started properly here. All right, so welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. Got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including Mysterious Chicago, the book. Flickering Empire, How Chicago Invented the U.S. Film Industry. That is coming up really soon. H.H. Holmes, Sunday morning, I just realized I'm spacing a little because I forgot to do the upcoming events JPEG. Okay, I knew I was leaving out a few things tonight. H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil, the brand new Murder Maps USA, out now through Thames and Hudson and advertised in national print media, which probably cost them more than I made on my last 6 books. And coming in August, Graceland Cemetery, Chicago Stories, Symbols, and Secrets, which a couple of residents there are people that we'll be talking about tonight, as a matter of fact. So, for fairly obvious reasons, a couple of years ago, I started doing virtual tours instead of just in-person tours, and that's allowed me to play around a little bit. It allows me to do tours that I couldn't really do in person just geographically. Stuff is spread around too far apart. So today we're going to do one in Bronzeville. This one I couldn't really do as a walking tour. We could do it as a bus tour, but a lot of it is just, I want to quick say, oh, here's who lived here. You don't want to really drive too far just for something like that. You need more story than that. So Bronzeville, we're going to start out. Here is a map of Chicago. All right, here's the loop. Bronzeville is down about 30 blocks south of the loop, give or take. The actual dimensions of where exactly Bronzeville is depends on who you're asking, but it encompasses approximately this area here. from about 31st down to about 51st, though other people extended a little further north and a little further south, but always east of the interstate. And of course, west of the lake. So, we'll go all the way back through the history. We generally think of it today as the Black Metropolis, which it was in the 1930s or so, but it's had several different identities over the years. We'll start out, in fact, with kind of the anchor of it, right over here on the lake. It was all land originally owned by Stephen Douglas, the bad guy from the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Now, he had some good qualities. He dropped out of the presidential race, effectively, to spend more effort lobbying the South not to secede from the Union. But on the other hand, I just don't think too highly of the guy. But his tomb now stands right over here. It was built almost 20 years after he died, they finally got the thing built. So he died shortly after the Civil War began. But this is Stephen Douglas, the little giant. You can actually tell that he's short in this picture. And here he is debating with Lincoln. You know, interesting thing about him, the way he became a judge in the first place is Illinois wanted to pack the Supreme Court. There was a 4-member Supreme Court, and they worried that they were going to change the rules and make it so non-citizens couldn't vote. At the time, all you had to do to vote in Illinois was to have lived here for 6 months. You didn't have to be a U.S. citizen or anything. They were afraid that the local state office was afraid that that was going to change, so they packed the Supreme Courts with people who would vote to uphold that, including Judge Douglas. Later, he pushed for getting the railroads to Chicago, which is really what made Chicago a city, and if it hadn't become a city, they never would have nominated Abraham Lincoln, the man who eventually spelled his political ruin. The grounds eventually became Camp Douglas, the old prison grounds, the old Confederate prison grounds. We covered that as the whole tour in and of itself. Let's take a quick look inside of the tomb. So, inside, you can walk right in. If you happen to show up on a day when it's open, and I never seem to be able to do that. It's open, it's got official posted hours, but it kind of operates irregularly, partly because not a lot of people probably want to come pay their respects to Stephen Douglas anymore. But you can walk in, and if you look on the side here, right, in these little cradles off to the side of the bust, there are brochures about him, set up on his sarcophagus. I think it's about the tackiest thing ever, and I absolutely love it. Also, here's the truck that was parked outside of it last time I tried to film it. It is a very nice monument. Plus, this guy's got all these heavy metal and pentagram things all over his pickup truck. Just the kind of guy I would think would want to work with Stephen A. Douglas. But the grounds of that Confederate prison camp extended really quite a long ways. In fact, when they built the Culvers, just over here, not too far away from it, They were afraid that they were going to find some dead bodies. A lot of people died in Camp Douglas. About 15,000 prisoners were held there, and about a third of them died. It really just wasn't all that well supplied, in common with every other Civil War prison. The sanitation in there was just horrible. People were getting typhoid fever and cholera like crazy. But we'll move off from the distance a little bit here. You can see the column standing way up there. We'll just go over here to Douglas and 35th, and talk a little bit about a ghost that used to haunt this area. Now, back here at 35th and Cottage Grove, there used to be a ghostly woman who would appear picking lilacs. This is like the late 19th, early 20th century. It's possibly the ghost of a woman named Elizabeth McCarthy, who had a house here in the 1870s. When she died, it is said that her daughters locked the room she had died in, leaving it just as it was for decades and decades. Streetcar drivers going by here said that they would see the ghost of her outside of the house picking lilacs all the time. As you can see, there are now no lilacs to pick, so apparently the ghost has moved on, as sometimes happens. Well, let's move down a little bit over to the lake. Just a little bit of ways away, there's this building still standing. It's been renovated somewhat, but this is a building from way back in the early 1860s. Now, one guy that we talk about quite a lot around here is Thomas Barber Bryan. He was the founder of Graceland Cemetery, one of our main topics of conversation, and during the Civil War, he bought up the handwritten draft of the Emancipation Proclamation from Abraham Lincoln and arranged to sell facsimiles of it to raise money for this soldiers' home. This became a place where soldiers could come and just hang out when they were on furlough, write letters, get a hot meal. It's a picture of how it looked before it was renovated. You can still see it's still much the same building. Been fixed up a little bit since then, but still very much the same. So inside of this place, this is the copies that they were selling, most of which probably didn't survive the Great Chicago Fire, but I'm sure some of them are still out there. But it was managed by a woman by the name of Ann Hosmer, whose son was a Civil War casualty. She shows up on the Graceland tour quite a bit. She was the manager here. There was one time when a guy from the Chicago Times came in. The Chicago Times was the anti-Lincoln paper in Chicago, and Mrs. Hosmer said, "I would rather have my hand cut off than write for that paper." Word of that got back to Old Man Story, the editor of the Chicago Times, who immediately fired off this editorial talking about these intolerant abolitionists. It's it's kind of a preview to nowadays. Every time somebody punches a Nazi, or today the kids in that university in Texas who chanted unrepeatable slogans at an anti-trans candidate who came to talk to the class, every time, the comments are all people going, "How tolerant." Exactly the kind of crap Wilbur F. Story used to pull right here at the Soldiers' Home. In fact, you might even say he invented it. His own house was not too far away from here, the house he was planning to build, in what is now a vacant lot over here at 47th between Vincennes and MLK. It was Grand Boulevard at the time. He'd hate that it was MLK. Wilbur F. Story, towards the end of his life, lost what marbles he had. Decided he was hearing voices in his head that were telling him to build himself this massive palace. There's not really a good photograph of what was built. This is probably the best drawing. It does match the one really murky photograph that survives. But he built himself this massive white marble palace. And it was a sprawling thing. The doors didn't always go anywhere. There were hallways to nowhere. The inside was a complete mess. It was not unlike the Winchester Mystery House out in California. In one of his lucid moments, Story was walking past and said, "What damn fool is building that thing?" Now, it wasn't quite finished at the time of his death, and it just kind of sat out there for years while people argued over his probate. His probate's was one of the better rides out there. I was hoping it would have some of the letters he had written dictated by the voices in his head, which I know came up at the trial. But his probate did have the will, which is right here. It's just a sheet of paper that says "My Will" up at the top. And then lists various things after that. But he had built himself this massive house on Grand Boulevard at a time when Grand Boulevard was the grandest street that there was. There was even a whole thing in the Investor Guide about him. Here is located the most magnificent and costly private enterprise on the boulevard, the palatial marble residence being erected by Mr. W. F. Story, editor and proprietor of the Times. No money, time, or thought is being spared. Well, certainly they weren't sparing too many thoughts. To make it one of the grandest and most attractive residences on the continent, the spacious grounds are already beautified and fine conservatories and lodge are completed. But as I said, Old Man Story has not quite finished with it. Nobody had moved into it yet at the time of his death, and then nobody wanted to. So they ended up busting it down eventually. And it's hard to say for sure, but it was used to build lots of other houses around the Chicago and Indiana area. And just riding around in the general vicinity, like here we go down some of the mansions still standing from that era. Some of these have marble ornamentation or marble stoops out front. You gotta wonder if that could be some of the relics of Old Man Story's place. It's impossible to know for sure. But some of the houses around here in the general vicinity, like on what is now MLK, it would start at 45th, a couple of blocks up from Old Man Story. This one block has like 3 notable houses on it. 2 of them are notable enough to have signs. One of them is a little more under the radar, but it's one of my favorites. Right here, this old gravestone is the home was the home for a while of the Marx Brothers. Not quite as recognizable in this particular picture as they are. This is them around the place. But here's a more recognizable shot. 1912, they were already a vaudeville family. They moved into this house with their parents. They were a whole family of performers. Their mother had decided that Chicago was the place to be. It was a big railroad hub. She thought it was going to grow up to be even larger than New York. The house cost them $20,000, which is equivalent of like $450,000 today, which is probably about what this place would cost today. In those days, there was a Grand Boulevard, though, was so much more of a big deal at the time. Every Sunday, there would be a promenade of all of the rich people in their carriages going down the street. One of those traditions that came for a while, seemed to be something that people based their lives around, and then just kind of disappeared over time. Now, at the same time, during World War I, they also bought a chicken farm upstate because there was a thing saying that if you were a farmer, you couldn't be drafted into World War I. So they bought a chicken farm as well. They kept them out of the draft. They eventually moved to New York City in 1920. Now, just down the block from them, this is just a little bit over to the side. The other one that is marked with a historical marker today was the home of Oscar and Jessie DePriest. And also, I believe, Oscar's mother, Martha DePriest, who was born enslaved down in Florence, Alabama. She and her husband, Neander, eventually followed Oscar up to Chicago. Oscar Stanton DePriest became the first black congressman of the 20th century. He had been an alderman here in Chicago for a while, starts appearing about 1916 in the Chicago Defender. How the Honorable Oscar DePriest has evolved from an employee of the Pullman Palace Car Company to the county commissioner and alderman of the Second Ward and an extensive property holder has become a part of the history of this county and the great city of Chicago. I can't remember why I had a picture of Clarence Darrow there, some connection he had to DePriest. But his wife, Jessie DePriest, is kind of the story of the big story these days when we look back on him. When Oscar was first elected to Congress, Mrs. Hoover had a big tea for all of the congressional wives, just like first ladies always did. And as a matter of course, Mrs. DePriest was invited. Now, this set off this huge firestorm of controversy. She went, she had a good time, said it was no big deal, nobody thought anything of it at the time, but meanwhile, several governments, state governments across the South started issuing formal condemnations of the event. Like this jerk. I deplore the incident beyond measure, declared Senator Morris Shepherd, author of the 18th Amendment. It is recognition of the social equality between the white and black races, and it is fraught with infinite danger to our white civilization. I deplore the incident very much, said Senator J.T. Heflin. Now, at one point, this guy had threatened he would physically stand to keep Oscar DePriest from coming into the Senate restaurant, at which DePriest said, I wasn't going to, but now I've got a mind to go see if he's big enough. And really, just in the last two houses, we can kind of see the progression. This place went from being a prison camp to being a neighborhood for the really rich people like Wilbur F. Story. Then it became a Jewish neighborhood, attracting people like the Marx Brothers. And by the 1920s, though, it had started to become the black metropolis. And we can see a bit more of that, in fact, just down the block. So there's the DePriest's place on the left. And we'll proceed just down to the corner here. This building, according to a Defender article from 1928, was the home of Ray Nance. Here's little Ray Nance as a kid holding his violin. He would go on to be the violin player and the trumpeter for the Duke Ellington Orchestra. And brought on board to replace Ben Webster on trumpet, which was by no means an enviable task, but he's my favorite member of the Duke Ellington Orchestra. They called him Showboat. Here's a quick clip of him. There's Duke. Later on, he would do a solo violin jazz album called Ray Nance Body and Soul. That's not him. I don't know why he just had a random woman on the cover instead of himself, but he did. But it's a gorgeous record. It's probably the best solo album by any member of the Duke Ellington Orchestra. But he grew up right here in the same house, on the same block as the DePriest and the Marx Brothers. I don't think his time with them, it may or may not have overlapped. It's hard to say. We'll also go around the block a little ways here. Over to 4533 Indiana. This was the home for a while of Bess Coleman, who was not only the first black woman to fly professionally, but I believe the first black person to fly planes professionally. This was at a time when it was very difficult to learn how to fly planes. And to raise money to learn to fly planes, she did a lot of work like working in manicure shops on State Street. This is a picture of her in 1918 wearing a mask to help protect her customers. At the time, being an aviatrix was a very, very difficult trade. She raised money. The Chicago Defender claimed that they put together a fund to help her go to France, where she could, the only place that would teach her to find a school that would take her on. If they did, in fact, raise funds, they did so very quietly. I couldn't find much in the newspaper archives about it. And when she got to France, she found that the school she had signed up for had decided they weren't taking women anymore after all. It was just kind of bad publicity. They just had a bad crash that killed a couple of their women students, and they just couldn't keep going on. So she found another one, had to walk a long way to get to the school, but she was used to walking a long way to get to school. It's something she had had to do all of her life. Eventually, she did learn how to fly, came back to the United States, and mostly made money doing barnstorming and stunts. She had a film deal. I wasn't able to find any footage of her surviving, but here's a look at what kind of work she was doing.
Daredevil. Her motto seemed to be, anything a man can do, I can do better. The dauntless little lady is Mabel Cody. Gladys Ingle used shackled ankles and a hook for her hair-raising transfers from plane to plane. Most amazing of all was 10-year-old Mildred Unger, who got right into the spirit of the Roaring Twenties by
this was just the way that you could make money doing as a flyer in these days.
A few years earlier, no woman would think of changing attire. Now, Gladys Ingle did it the hard way, carrying a whole wheel aloft. Imagine transferring planes while hanging onto a heavy wheel.
I can't even watch. All right. Bess Coleman did get herself a movie deal with D. Ireland Thomas to appear under his personal direction in theaters in connection with her reels of educational features showing her flight over Berlin. Now, her big goal was she wanted to attract more black pilots. She didn't want to be the only one. Here's a picture of her with Being Films. We know the film existed at one point. But unfortunately, in 1926, she was killed in an accident. It wasn't a plane that she was flying. There was a problem with a plane that she was riding in, and she ended up being killed. But before that, she had worked as a manicurist on the Stroll, had really a fascinating life. She's finally starting to get more recognition these days. But of course, we can't really talk about Bronzeville without talking about the music, more than we have so far. Now here we have the site of the old Sunset Cafe, which looked like this on the inside. This is over down on 35th Street. Here featuring Louis Armstrong, the Iron Lip Cornet Wonder, in the big feature in Carol Dickinson's Sunset Orchestra, Chicago. The inside of it, well, here's the cool thing, is on the inside you can still see the mural. It's a beauty shop now. Here.
Yes, it is,
There's a bit of Earl playing.
Father Hines and his great band playing for you from the new Grand Terrace on Chicago's great South Side. Get ready now for 30 minutes of Super Jive in the Father Hines style. Yeah.
It's one of the greatest relics of Jazz Age Chicago still sitting around right there. It was on Ace Hardware for years and years. But the beauty shop that's taken it over now really does a much better job of keeping this stuff on display. With the Ace Hardware store, you kind of had to know that it was there, and they kind of had to have the right doors open at the right time. But Earl Father Hines was a regular player at the Sunset, eventually renamed the Grand Terrace. And here's a clip of him in the 1970s talking about Al Capone coming into this place. Now, you know, if you're a longtime viewer of this channel, you know that I'm very skeptical of any stories about Al Capone going anywhere. But here it is, first-hand account.
Al came in there and one night and called the whole band and show together and said, now, we want to let you know our position. He says, we just want you people to tend to your own business. We'll give you all the protection in the world. He says, we want you to be like the three monkeys. You hear nothing, you see nothing, and you say nothing. And that's what we did. And I used to hear many things, many of the things that they were going to do, but I never did tell anyone. And sometimes the police used to come always looking for a fall guy used to come in and say, Earl, what were they talking about? I said, I don't know. So, well, you were sitting right there. I said, yeah, I sit on the bus too, but I don't pay attention to what people are saying. So I said, no, you're not going to pick me, because they had a habit of putting the pictures of these different people that would bring information in the paper. And the next day you find them out there in the lake somewhere, swimming around there with some chains attached to their feet and all that, you know what I mean?
Now, I'm always skeptical of any and all Capone stories, even when we're getting it firsthand. By the 1970s, when this was filmed, every jazz artist from Chicago in this era had to have some story about Capone. It was just kind of expected. Really, according to some people who lived in the neighborhood, the big gangster was a member of Capone's gang, Sam Golfbag Hunt, who we just talked about a couple of weeks ago over on the Morning Mini Tours. But we just talked about Louis Armstrong playing here. Louis actually lived fairly nearby, and it originally played in the Lincoln Gardens on 31st. In fact, it was probably at Lincoln Gardens on 31st that he had his first joint, and was very seldom sober thereafter. In fact, Bud Freeman used to say that this was really in Chicago on 31st Street and in places like the Sunset where jazz was really born. He wasn't trying to say white people created it or anything. He said that when Louis Armstrong and King Oliver and guys like that were down in New Orleans, they were still really playing ragtime. It was when they came up to Chicago and Louis Armstrong moved into this house that they developed this sound into jazz, the beat that'll be with us forever, he said. Louis continued playing around Chicago for years and years. And eventually there were lots and lots of jazz clubs around, like right across from the old Sunset was a place called the Plantation Cafe, where the BP is now. It looked like this. In 1927, it was either bombed or caught fire. Nobody was really sure which. It was initially reported that it had been bombed, but it was probably just a fire. The mob was known to bomb these places. If there was a location that they wanted, they would do whatever it took to get it. But the place had actually been empty for about a year at the time that it was at the time that the fire broke out. They had been shut down in 1926 because a couple of investigators went there and found that they were charging $1.25 for ginger ale. That's like a $25 glass of ginger ale. No artisan ginger ale goes for that. It was clearly they were selling booze. This was 1927. That was illegal. But just down around the corner from the beauty salon was this building. This is the old 8th Regiment Armory building. It was built for the 8th Regiment, a black unit that was founded back in the 1870s, then reformed during the Spanish-American War and became the 370th, which was a segregated unit that fought in both World War I and World War II, known as the Black Devils, fought under the French. Now, their armory was officially their armory, but by the 1920s, it was largely being used as a community center. They were always having rallies and fundraisers and parties and dances there, including this one, 1938, when Duke Ellington headed a benefit dance there. There's an interesting picture from that. It's got Ivy Anderson, who sang with the Ellington Orchestra on quite a few of their recordings. Shows her playing there. Just look at the crowd. It's a remarkably integrated crowd. Many of these clubs actually were integrated. That was something you didn't see in other neighborhoods, at least not so officially. And speaking of the 8th Regiment, just on the other corner from that BP station is this monument, the Victory Monument, built in 1928 by Leonard Cronell, a guy that was discovered by Laredo Taft, the guy who did the Fountain of Time statue, and not to mention the Eternal Silence statue, that spooky one at Graceland Cemetery. This is a monument to the 8th, featuring a black soldier, also a guy who's topless for reasons not entirely clear, other than to show off his awesome pectoral muscles, but still stands there to this day. We'll move down around the block here a bit. Just down the road is this magnificent building. This was the offices of the Chicago Defender. This was the black newspaper that dominated Chicago's black society scene and the black political scene. It wasn't the only black paper in Chicago. It was probably the best known. They were arguably the people who coined the term Bronzeville. There's a number of different people, a number of different claims as to where the term Bronzeville came from. Certainly it started going around a lot more after the mid-1930s when the Chicago Defender started having a contest every year to have somebody be the mayor of Bronzeville. The first year, 1934, they elected a guy named James E. Knight, who ran a He ran the Palm Terrace, a jazz club. He was just described as a man about town all the time. This wasn't an official position, but it got you into a lot of parties. It was just, officially, it was a title that brought fun and hilarity, according to one article. Here's a great picture of Ethel Waters coming into the Defender office to cast her ballot. Ethel was the first black woman to have her own TV show. Honestly, one of the first people, period, to have her own TV show. She had a show called the Ethel Waters Variety Hour, which started in 1939. Now, people like to point at Nat King Cole's TV show as being one of the first black TV shows. That was 17 years after Ethel had hers. Now, there was also a regular column here by a guy named Bud Billiken. There were a number of writers who were Bud Billiken over the years. A Billiken was a kind of doll. Bud was the original writer's first name, and really, it was the children's column. But eventually they started having Bud Billiken clubs all over the place. It was a club, like a social club where the kids would learn to read. Usually they were old enough to read, but they learned about writing, they learned about painting, they learned all kinds of artistic expression. It was very popular. Like Ray Nance himself was a member of the Bud Billiken Club. Actually first saw Duke Ellington with his own eyes. I'm thinking of Nat King Cole. Nat King Cole, also a Bud Billiken, first saw Duke Ellington when he was in a Bud Billiken parade. And everybody who is anybody was in the Bud Billiken Day Parade, still is. I remember Chance the Rapper was the Grand Marshal a couple of years ago. But Nat King Cole also was an old Bud Billiken man. And his house still stands as well, over at 4023 South Vincennes, just 3 blocks north of the old Story Castle. Now, he was just a little kid when he first came to Chicago with his parents. They came for the 1933 World's Fair, coming up from Alabama, and decided, hey, this is a much better place to raise kids than Alabama. There's a lot more opportunities here. And look what happened. Not too far away, over at 3631 South Prairie, was the home of Quincy Jones, the great producer. And he's been around for a long time. This is the guy who produced Thriller, but not to mention he was working with Ray Charles in 1955 and making arrangements for Sinatra at the Sands in the 1960s. We'll move over a little bit here, get a little bit closer to State Street. Over here on 35th, in what is now just some railroad tracks and parking lots, which is kind of a theme for a lot of the major sites of Bronzeville, was the Café de Champion, which was operated in 1912 by Jack Johnson, the boxing heavyweight champion, the first black heavyweight champion. And it wasn't just his name on the marquee either. He actually ran the place, lived upstairs from the place, would walk around just showing off and shaking hands with everybody. Cheerfully called white people a vanquished but aspiring race. When it opened, the newspapers were often rather hostile to Johnson, but they were in awe of the place. There was artwork estimated being worth between $15,000 and $50,000. There were electric fans at a time when people hadn't really seen that before. It was, by all accounts, a really nice place. Solid silver cuspidors that you could spit into. Now, eventually, it was only really open for a few months. His wife died by suicide upstairs from the place. She was reportedly carried out in front of all of the patrons. Then there started being some stories going around about domestic abuse, though the source was completely unknown. Then one of the waitresses he became involved with's father back up in Canada had Johnson arrested under the Mann Act. He had to close the place down and flee for a while. But here's something. Not too far away from here is M.W. Fuller Elementary School. It's one of the, as we're changing the names of things, I keep trying to write to the right people. This should be a prime candidate. M.W. Fuller was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court who upheld the separate but equal ruling. By no means should there be a school named after this guy, really anywhere, let alone in Bronzeville. But here's the thing, when he died, it was really a second-place story of the day next to Jack Johnson winning a match. So here's the Chicago Daily Inter-Ocean from the day after Melville Fuller died. Justice Fuller is dead. Jack Johnson. I love this. It looks almost like he's very excited that Justice Fuller is dead. But really, being as close to State Street as this was, even in 1910 and 1912, the Defender was starting to call this stretch of State Street that's over here the Stroll. The Stroll eventually became a place that was said to have, they called it the Great Light Way because it was so lit up as early as 1910. One place called it the one continuous round of fun and a poor man's paradise because you could just walk down from one club to another and just hear the music coming from outside. One person famously said there was so much music in the air on the Stroll that you could just hold up an instrument and the air would blow music out of it. Unfortunately, here is the Stroll today. It's really nothing left of it at all. It's all just become a part of the Illinois Institute of Technology campus now. IIT moved into the place in the mid-20th century, right around the time redlining was ended and a lot of the black middle class was starting to move out of the neighborhood. But IIT made a concentrated effort to really just take over the neighborhood. And they've gotten a little bit better about admitting to it now. They're starting to work on trying to make things a little bit better. But here's a bit of their campus. This is a Mies van der Rohe building. It was built right on the grounds of the old Mecca Flats. This was a place that was originally built as a hotel during the World's Fair for 1893. Then after that, when there wasn't quite as much need for all of these hotels, they converted it into apartments. By 1937, they had taken out the fountain. It was kind of starting to fall apart, partly because IIT had moved in and was just completely neglecting it. There was a big effort to save it, but it just didn't succeed, and it was torn down in the 1950s. Let's move over just a little bit here, but also on the campus, where there are now some volleyball courts, was once the home of a guy by the name of Anderson Punch, better known as the Chicken Man. Born in Louisiana in the 1870s, the son of enslaved people, he made his way to Chicago in the 1940s. He was already 70 when he came to Chicago, but he would perform all over the city with a dancing chicken. Still fondly remembered by people who used to see him just all over town. And there is actually some film footage of him, too. This is him on Maxwell Street. Remarkable that this footage exists. I was thrilled just to find out there were pictures of this guy when I first started researching him.
Lay down like a baby, go to sleep. Lay down like a baby, go to sleep. Lay down like a baby, go to sleep.
He was occasionally hauled in front of the court, often for performing without a license. But told a judge he had had some lean times, but never had to eat one of the chickens.
Let me have a shot. No baby, not so business, Papa. I know baby, not so business. I'm a show man. Me.
He was still performing on his 100th birthday. All right, let's move on a little bit here. Onto the Stroll itself. And right about where the Starbucks is now, because of course there's a Starbucks there now, was one of several locations of a place called variously the Cabin Inn and the Cozy Cabin. It had a couple of different locations over the years. Now, the Cozy Cabin was advertised often as the oddest nightclub in town. I love this ad, featuring the world's foremost female impersonators. What this was a black drag club and a black gay club. Valda Gray was one of the most notable drag performers of the day. Here's Valda herself. You always refer to drag characters by their characters' pronouns. One thing I can't figure out is there was a lot of talk about Peaches Browning performing here. Now, Peaches Browning comes up on these tours every now and then. She was one of the big sensations of the 1920s. The Chicago Defender later described it as that era of beautiful nonsense. She married a guy named Daddy Browning when she was like 15 years old, and he was considerably older than that. It was a bit of a scandal. The marriage did not last, and she tried to make a theatrical career for years. One thing I absolutely can't figure out if this was the actual Peaches performing at the Cabin Inn, or a drag performer who was using Peaches as their drag thing. There's actually remarkably one photograph of the inside of this. I think that the person in the middle there is a person who in regular life was known as Dick Barrow, but performed under the name Sepia Mae West. So in here at the big floor show, there was a big trend. There would be like the Sepia Marlena Dietrich, the Sepia Mary Pickford. And these were black drag performers. And initially, the opening performer there was generally somebody acting like Sally Rand, the fan dancer from the World's Fair of 1893, doing that same routine. But one other place that is sometimes said to be, it wasn't specifically a gay club, but it was known for at least being gay-friendly and would occasionally host drag shows as well, was quite a ways further down, really by some metrics outside of the borders of Bronzeville, but also a place that comes up in every big history of Bronzeville, which of course was the Club de Lisa. I know we've got a de Lisa out there watching today. But this is the space where the Club de Lisa stood. This was kind of known as the most deluxe club of all of them. It's a jazz club featuring Red Saunders and his orchestra. If you look carefully here, you can see the building next to it there appears to be still standing. And possibly the one to the left over there. So this would have occupied the vacant space there and also the CBJ. Here's a terrific shot of the front with this great old car on the outside of it. So this was a club run by Mike, Louie, and Jimmy DeLisa. Kind of remarkably, I couldn't find a recording from the inside of this place. But one thing, if you look up pictures about this was the kind of club where you'd be hanging out and people would just kind of come in and start and take a picture and then sell you a picture of it later. This is one that Kristen just sent me. This is Kristen's grandparents on the far right. And you can see any number of pictures that are kind of like this that turn up. If you just Google Club de Lisa picture, a lot of people still have the pictures of their grandparents hanging out in this place. I'll just show, here's an ad from it. Might have to move this one around a little. Transform. Welcome fair visitors. This would have been in the 1933 fair. Welcome fair visitors to Whoopee Night at beautiful Club de Lisa, 5516 South State Street, featuring King Bozo and Nutty Knights, dine and dance with Hap Draper and his accordions. Plural. You know, I gotta say, if I went back in time to 1933 and said, all right, we're going to Club de Lisa, and I was there and Hap Draper and his accordions were playing, might be a little bit let down. There was one other picture of this that I found. See if this one shows up. Yeah. Another picture. This is people dancing to Red Saunders and his orchestra here at Club de Lisa. And I am especially impressed by the people on the back here. Now, this was known, it wasn't specifically a gay club, but it was known for being gay-friendly. It was an integrated club. And also, you can see from these people in the back, they were very tolerant of squares. Looks like Calvin Coolidge back there. And also, look how much fun they're having in these shots. I'm a little bit over on time now, but I will show just a couple of other famous houses here. Just up the road, this one with the red turret was the home of Ida B. Wells, who is now the namesake of what used to be Congress Street, because it's not like Congress ever deserves to have anything named after it. But she came up here from the South after publishing her book, Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in All Its Phases. And I will say the House of Representatives just voted yesterday to make lynching a federal crime. There were 3 people voting against it. They tried to give their reasons, but they're ridiculously unconvincing. It now goes to the Senate. It's been to the Senate before. Rand Paul held it up last time. We'll see what happens this time. But that was her house with the red turret right there. And down over on 42nd Street, this red house was the home of Daniel Hale Williams, who we just talked about the other day on Graceland Cemetery off the route. He's a little bit off of the usual roads that I take in Graceland Cemetery on the walking tours, but he was a doctor at Providence Hospital who became famous after performing open-heart surgery on a guy named James Cornish. Now, as far as anybody knew, at the time, nobody had ever done open-heart surgery before. So one of those things where whether it was the first depends on who you ask and what you count. But James Cornish came walking in one day saying he needed help immediately. He'd just been stabbed. Newspapers said that he had been stabbed with something called a sailor's knife. Examination showed that the wound went all the way down to his heart, and Dr. Williams managed to sew it back up while it was still beating. This made the news at the time, sewed up his heart. All right, being a bit over time. See, we're a little bit off here. This was last week's upcoming tour, so I'll just tell you what's coming up. On Sunday morning, we'll be talking about silent film in Chicago. That's silent film. There was a period when Chicago was the place to go to make movies, and we'll talk quite a bit about that on Sunday morning and show clips from some of the films. Thursday night will be a brand new one of Hyde Park, a neighborhood nearby Bronzeville. That's a brand new tour that I'll be putting together over the course of the next week. And the Thursday after that is St. Patrick's Day, and you know what that means. Time Travel Pub Crawl. We're going to be reprising our St. Patrick's Day Time Travel Pub Crawl with music guests. And if you're not used to the tours around here, when we're working virtually, we're not bound by time or space, so we can go to any pub from any time or place. Also, everybody, if you want a Mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, hoodie, etc., cafepress.com/Mysterious Chicago has everything you need, including the new Johann Hawk shirts. And coming soon, we should have a new one for Mystericon 2022. We're still a bit of ways away from that. I'm trying not to jump the gun too much on that one. And with that, everybody, we will put Earl Father Hines back on a little bit and just hang out like we always do. So everybody, thanks a lot for joining me today. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. If you want to kick something in, the Venmo is Adam Chicago, PayPal adam@mysteriouschicago.com, or for lots more cool Chicago history stuff, join patreon.com/Adam Chicago. And with that, I gotta move back into the Finder and find that file again. No, not Finds Hines. That one's on me.
Turn on now to the next tune. Earl Father Hines gives us a bit of jive under the general heading of So Help Me.
A little jive under the general heading of So Help Me. All right, thanks, everybody. Judy, thanks for coming back. We're always here, except when we're not. Thanks, Marcia. Thanks, Gina. Glad to hear that. I had to check how that video is doing on the TikTok. TikTok is Adam Chicago. And yeah, okay, it's up to 6,000 views now. And I've got about 50 new followers. Yay! There's that dopamine rush. I'm an addict. Pearl's Place in the inn above it, yeah. I mean, there's only so much, I try to keep these things to about 40, 45 minutes. So naturally, I can't fit everything. Well, 6,000 views isn't necessarily viral on TikTok, but by my standards it is. It's not like one of those millions of views things. Jerry, thanks. Where are the kitties? I saw one of them walk by not long ago. Hey, cats. If they don't show up on their own in a couple of minutes, I'll go find them. Hey, have a good night, Jordana. Meryl, TikTok's kind of fun, but it's all, for me, the best is the promo to get people to come to these things. Carla, I am having some Buffalo Trace. And of course, I barely scratched the surface of that neighborhood. There's so much more. I know Sherman does tours down there. Sherman Dilla Thomas. He's the big Chicago history guy on TikTok.
Well, we're about halfway through this jive concert by Earl Father Hines and his orchestra, so now it can be told it's reaching you from the new...
Thanks, Kathy.
Chicago South Side, where the couples are gaily dancing here in the cool atmosphere to this jive of Earl Father Hines. Yeah, but now comes
that would be good. There's a lot of good graves down at that cemetery. Oh, speaking of the cats, here comes Priya. Hey, Priya. What's up to, baby? You gonna come hang out with us? You gonna come here? No.
Now that we have met, the world may know the sentimental story. The greatest romance that ever knew.
I've only met Sherman once. It was at the unveiling of the gravestone for the kid who was the first person to die in the 1919 race riots, which I've actually, there's a whole set of material for them in this deck, but I decided this isn't a trauma tour. I don't want to talk about bad stuff on this tour. I mean, that's important too, but it's a whole tour in and of itself. Yeah, Bob, I've looked for some temporary tattoo places. We'll find something. But it's hard to get low print run on that stuff. Shag, quite right. I should probably do a whole volume 2 of this one. But with all of the stories on here, especially, I wish there was more out there about the Cabin Inn. There's been a number of articles about it, and like Queer Identity in Bronzeville, but they just kind of rehash the same information. You see, is Priya under there? Yep. Hey, Priya. And of course, Miles has to make an appearance. Now, those of you new around here, we do these every Thursday night and every Sunday morning, plus every day at 10 a.m. on the Facebook at least, there's a 10-minute morning mini-tour. Yesterday we covered kind of a micro neighborhood hidden inside of the DePaul campus. This morning was the old Howard Theater. We've done lots of cool stuff on there. One day soon I got to do another one down in Hyde Park. Just 'cause I got a lot of footage to get for next week's Hyde Park tour. Danielle, there were places that were referred to as pansy parlors in the parlance of the day. They were more around Tower Town, but there were a couple in Bronzeville as well. Tower Town being like around the water tower near North Side. Yeah, Find a Grave Friday can take a little longer sometimes. Tomorrow morning will be Find a Grave Friday. That's the day where I go to a cemetery where I know a particular grave is, but I don't look up where it is. At most, I'll have someone do recon to make sure that the section is somewhere out there online. And then we figure it out in the comments where they are. Well, once again, the new publication date for the Graceland Cemetery book, featuring Daniel Hale Williams and the DePriests, mentioned tonight, is August 8th. But it looks like they'll have copies in at the warehouse in June. So I might have some early ones. It's weird, you know, like, novels I used to get, like, I would get an advance copy a year before the book came out. And often you can kind of tell, like, this is an advance copy of the H.H. Holmes one. It's got the, like, the date on the side there. And often if they're really going to be promoting it, it'll have, like, all of the marketing plans on the back. You notice that this one has none.
A little kiss at twilight.
They did okay with that one, though. Oh yeah, the challenge ones are fun. I don't think it's going to be too terribly hard. Pride Chicago pub crawl? Yeah. Yeah, the Club de Lisa is known as referred to as gay friendly, though not specifically catering to, like, their main piano player was openly gay. But the Cozy Cabin / Cabin Inn was pretty specifically and openly operating like that. Shaq, my TikTok is Adam Chicago, same as the Venmo. And mostly it's little Chicago history things, stuff I film around the cemeteries and stuff. But I just started it like a week ago. Audrey, you'll get it when you get it. When it comes out. Hopefully they'll be able to start shipping earlier than that, though. But I am in talks with Graceland to try to figure out a way to be doing... They're going to be doing construction over the summer. Redoing their whole entrance. Yeah, occasionally you get some cooking tips around here, though if you take a cooking tip from me, you're kind of asking for it.
And down the groove now, we rather imagine you'll hear that famous 7 brass of Earl Hines in Bambino.
Sleep well, Judy. How are the Putintaschen? Okay, I'm not great at baking. But it's the time of year when we make Hamantaschen to commemorate our victory over Haman, the bad guy in the Purim story. So this year I made Putintaschen. Snuggle pupping shirt? We could do something like that. Did I do that? Did I? In one of my books, there's some kids that call themselves the Snuggle Puppies. What they are is bowling alley skanks. They might have had a t-shirt. Oh, that dopamine rush. This thing is up to 7,000 views. Maybe I ought to up the production values some. Let me go find Miles. Well, here you are, Miles. You've just been hanging out this whole time, huh? Well, your public demands you've never missed a tour yet. Here's the boy. Aww. He was on that love seat the whole time. Oh.
Here's rhythm and jive, Earl Father Hines and the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, he's a sleepy boy. He's got to get some rest in, so about 2 o'clock in the morning, he and Priya can chase each other around. Which they do. Alright, Miles. We'll do a quick, let's do TikTok Kitty, okay? We'll do TikTok. Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. Alright, put you back down when you're nice and warm. There's a fun TikTok of Miles chasing his mouse with Metallica in the background. Does he meow at night? Sometimes. We're still trying to determine exactly when his birthday is. Or even vaguely. It's like March, April, somewhere in there. No, these two like to chase each other around all the time. Lori, other than Miles being the main logo, as seen right over here. In that way, he's on the shirts. I don't know how easy it is to find a place that still plays trad jazz. You always go to the Green Mill. Despite the historical inaccuracies of the place. It is pretty old. And the show is great. Alright, stay spooky, Bob. Oh, California Clippers back now. That's good, too. Alright, Earl's going to be finishing up in a minute or so here. So while Earl finishes up, though I don't have a graphic for it, Sunday morning is going to be silent film in Chicago. Next Thursday, a brand new tour of the Hyde Park, Kenwood area. Thursday after that, time travel pub crawl for St. Patrick's Day. Thanks to everybody who's been kicking into the Venmo, the PayPal, joining the Patreon. The Patreon's the best thing you can do, really. But thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. I will see you tomorrow for Find a Grave Friday. If you haven't found it before, check out the Mysterious Chicago Regulars and Miles fan club group here on Facebook to get all the information about coming this fall, Mystericon 2. The Mystericon-ing. I'll come up with a better title than that. But thanks a lot, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer. Have a great night from Mysterious Chicago, and everybody, stay spooky.